Good evening and welcome to Quorum, your chance to find out what's going on at the state capitol during this legislative session. It's also your chance to get your questions answered. We'll tell you more on how to do that in just a moment. Tonight we're talking about the budget in what is expected to be a tight year for state spending. Tonight our guests are the heads of the Appropriations Committees for the House and the Senate. Those committees help decide where state money is spent and what programs are funded with state dollars. From the Senate, we have Senator Buck Clark, who is the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He is a Republican, and his district includes Bolivar, Humphreys, Sharkey, Washington, and Yazoo counties. Also from the Senate Appropriations Committee is the Vice Chairman, Senator Terry Burton. He is a Republican, and his district includes Lauderdale, Newton, and Scott counties. From the House of Representatives is the chairman of their Appropriations Committee, Representative Herb Frierson. He is a Republican, and his district includes Lamar and Pearl River counties. The vice chairman from the House Appropriations Committee is also with us. He is Representative Mac Huddleston. He's a Republican and represents Pontotoc County. Good evening, gentlemen. We thank you all four for being with us tonight. Good evening. I want to let you know also how you can weigh in. If you have a question for our panel, there are several ways you can let us know. You can call us. The number is 1-877-405-5247. You can also send us an email. The address for that is mpbonline.org. And if you'd like to use Twitter, you can use the hashtag Quorum to reach us that way. Governor Phil Bryant has released his executive budget recommendation for fiscal year 2013, which begins on June 1st of this year. In his report, he outlined some of the challenges he sees on the horizon. Those include the sagging economy, high unemployment, and slow economic growth. The governor's report goes on to say that we must use our state revenues wisely, insulate against unseen shortfalls, and take a balanced approach to the upcoming budget. So, senators, representatives, do you agree with the governor's assessment, and how do we do that? Senator Clark, I'd like to start with you. You're new to this process, at least as a chair, aren't you?
Yeah, new to the appropriations and the budget process on the appropriations side. Been in finance the last 8 years. We've got economic shortfalls. We've had sagging revenues, as the whole country has experienced the economic downturn. And one thing that's affecting the states is the lack of federal funds that we had for the last few years, and the ARRA money that went away, and the some other federal money because of the tightening of the budget in Washington. And so that's one of the main things we're going to have to overcome in the next couple of years.
So in your role as chairman, how does that affect you and your job as chairman of your panel's committee?
Well, the whole budget starts with how big is the pie.
Yeah. And
we know the pie is shrinking, and we're trying to put a budget together. You know, in a perfect world, your budget would consist of your recurring revenues. And when you're having to put a budget together with one-time money, well, from year to year, you got to go find new one-time money, and that's what's made it difficult.
So, Representative Frierson, on the House side, you're chairman of the Appropriations Committee over there. What do you see as the biggest challenge in the upcoming budget year?
Well, I think Buck summed it up pretty good. I mean, you know, we've got the challenge of, you know, we got 230 something million in one-time money in the budget being spent on recurring cost, and we've got to deal with that. We've probably over the next 3 years got to reduce that number so that we don't just come into 1 year and do a lot of dramatic cuts. You know, so we got to be pretty diligent in finding a way to do this with having the least impact on governmental services provided to our citizens, and at the same time be fiscally responsible to the taxpayer.
So, Senator Burton, you've been through this before. How do we do that?
Well, this is my third time as vice chairman. I was vice chairman in 2 previous terms on the committee, and I've been on the committee for 20 years. And it's certainly a different world now that we have the spirit of cooperation that we have between the 2 houses that we haven't had in the past. It's not so much a taffy pull as it is a candy making now, so that's a good thing. And let me mention one thing. In your opening, you said the new budget starts June 1st. That's July 1st is when the new budget will take effect, July 1st. And until then, we have the opportunity to put together a budget that will benefit the citizens of the state, provide services for the citizens of the state, make sure that when they go to their local office, whatever it might be, driver's license, DHS, Human Services, Medicaid, or whatever the case may be, Public Health Department, we have an opportunity to put together a budget that will make sure those services are there when people expect them, and not raise the revenue on the people of the state, not raise taxes on people. Right. You're not going to see that happen. So we have a minute, a finite group of funds that will be available to us. They might be minute in some people's eyes too, but they're finite for sure. We know that we're going to have a certain pot to work with. We'll know what that pot is somewhere around the end of March, first part of April, and we'll start putting together the budget as we go through the last few weeks of the session. The problem we have is agencies come in asking for $1.2 or $3 billion over and above this year's appropriation, and we know that we had federal money fall out, as the chairman said, and we have some good months and some bad months. Right now we're a little ahead on projections, so we know we've got to work. We got work to do. We're going to prioritize like we always do and put together a budget that's good for the people of the state.
Representative Huddleston, let me ask you. Senator Burton mentioned the whole concept of the party, the fact that there is Republican control now on both sides of the Capitol there. How do you think that will affect this budget process and reaching a common ground on the budget?
You know, last time we served with Democratic control of the House, as you very well know, and Republican control of the Senate, and we were able to get it worked out. And I think surely now with Republicans in control of both sides, we can. And one thing that I would urge each person, regardless of party that they're in, is to when we go in the appropriations process, we need to put those aside. We need to be Mississippians first, and we need to try to solve Mississippi problems instead of Republican problems. And that's the way I look at it. And I expect a lot of cooperation among members of the House and in between the House and the Senate.
Well,
it's certainly not going to be, let me just say this, it's certainly not going to be a rubber stamp situation. They'll have their ideas, we'll have our ideas, I'll have my ideas, and Senator Clark will have his, and we'll work those out. But there'll be differences. It's certainly not going to be a rubber stamp, and we will differ with the governor. The House will differ with the Lieutenant Governor. The Senate will differ with the Speaker. These things happen. I mean, we all have different ideas that we bring to the table. But the situation is a much better situation for getting things done, I think. So.
We have a caller with a question for us now. This is Rick in Madison, who has a question about the Health Department. Rick in Madison, go ahead with your question, please, sir.
Well, my question is that the Appropriations Committee is threatening to slash $6 million or more from the Health Department budget, and that would threaten the state's ability to come up with the federal matching funds for ADAP, which is the HIV medications. And 2,000 or 3,000 people rely on those drugs to live every day. And retail cost of those drugs is $1,500 to $2,000 a month. How do you justify letting those people die if we can't afford the ADAP program?
Let me speak to that because I was on the budget committee that made that recommendation.
That was legislative elbow.
That was the legislative budget recommendation, and it was made on bad information. Let's just call it like it is. We got bad information. The decision was made to make a recommendation based on that bad information. We will go back and correct that problem. Another thing, we've been receiving those AIDS funds without any match requirement. You know, now there's a match requirement, so that adds to the situation. We're going to fund the Department of Health. We're going to make sure that people with AIDS have the ability to receive some of those medications that they need so desperately using those funds. We will come up with the match. These are the things that we will do. We're not going to let people die. And remember, we haven't slashed anything because nothing's been decided. A recommendation was made based on bad information. One of the analysts read the information wrong, and we voted on a budget based on that wrong reading. We're going to fix it. No recommendation has been made for the legislature to vote on yet. That's coming down the road. So please don't absolutely panic about the health department or any other budget for that matter, education included. We have not even begun that process.
And we'll get to education. Perhaps this is a good time to explain the process, because we have this. We have the governor's budget recommendation, which we talked about a minute ago. We have the LBO. What's the process here? Because we seem to have these proposals from different places. How do they get eventually fashioned into a budget?
I might ought to get Senator Burton to talk about the real beginning point for putting this budget together is back in the fall.
We begin 18 months out trying to determine what agencies need. Agencies are required to put in their suggestion or their request to the budget committee, the budget staff,
So the health department, for example, would say we need this much. Another department says we need this much.
Right, and we're going to need this much 18 months from now. That's the thing. We think we're going to need this much 18 months from now. And so then the Legislative Budget Committee meets in the fall. We see those recommendations. We listen to the agencies and hear their requests.
They each come before the committee
exactly.
and make their presentation.
Defend their request.
They
right.
make their requests. That's right.
And then those requests are taken into consideration. The budget staff then puts together a recommendation based on the request of the agencies, the guidelines that the committee develops, as far as replacing federal money, filling or paying for unfilled positions, those kinds of things. And then that recommendation is brought to us. We spend a week or so deliberating that recommendation, and then we bring it across the street, so to speak, to recommend it to the legislature for their consideration. It's not the holy grail of budgeting. It's not the budget Bible. It is a recommendation as best we can determine based on information that was given to us at least a year before it will take effect. Then we come in the legislature. The Appropriations Committees have the agencies come before them, make those requests again, make some updates, some changes. The Legislative Appropriations Committees then vote on a budget for each individual agency. They cross in the hall. The House votes on their budgets. They send them to us. We vote on our budget, send them to them. Then we consider theirs. They consider ours. And then we go to conference the last week or two of the session, and that's when the real decisions are made, because we know how much money we're going to have, what the real, true, honest-to-goodness need and request is, and what we're able to fund.
That's where the candy making comes in.
That's where the candy making comes in rather than the taffy pull.
Now, how does that compare to the governor's budget recommendation?
The governor's budget recommendation is somewhat different than the legislative budget recommendation. I personally think, and I know the governor put a lot of hard work, and he heard the request from the agencies because he was a part of the budget committee as lieutenant governor. Yeah. So I think he's put together a good budget, one that he thinks will work. It differs somewhat in some areas, particularly IHL and community colleges and so forth, than the legislative budget recommendation does. But I feel like at the end of the day, we'll have a budget that the governor will gladly sign off on and put into effect.
A complex process.
It's a complex process and a lot of compromise, and not compromising on philosophy or any of those things, political beliefs, but compromising on certain issues and certain dollars.
All right. Well, the governor has made good on a campaign promise pushing for a Smart Budget Act. This would be focused on a more performance-driven budget system. Senators, this has passed the Senate. It died in the House over the past 2 years. Do you think it has a chance of passing this year? Will it be brought up again? Will it pass over there?
I'm looking at that right now. I have the bill that passed the Senate last year and looking at that, and there's some changes that I think need to be made to it.
Because explain what a performance-driven budget system is.
What performance-based budget is each agency sets up their performance criteria, how you can measure how successful they are in their mission. Mm-hmm. And thus you would then budget according to how successful they are.
Mm-hmm. You do better, you get more money.
That's that theory there. But what we've been discussing is we may not be held totally to those performance guidelines or the performance of that agency, or do we follow it? That's kind of the debate we're looking at right now. How close do you follow it? But one thing is that you have to agree on if you're going to move in that budget process is agreeing on what the criteria is. I heard an explanation of it a few years ago from a Florida budget analyst, and he said there are agencies that might take 5 or 10 years deciding where they finally, can decide what the final criteria that they should be measured against. And so it's not something you turn on, but it's something we can begin doing. And right now, we've actually had this in the law, and there are a lot of agencies that produce their performance criteria. So some of the work's already been done.
Huh. Well, gentlemen from the House, if you are presented with something like this again, what do you think its chances are?
We're going to look at it real close. We kind of like the idea of it, and we're going to learn about it. And, it was never debated or presented to the House in the past 2 years, and it's a pretty good learning curve for us. And we've been talking with our staff, and we've been talking with other folks. And, there is parts of the budget that has the performance stuff in it. We've just never used it. We've just kind of passed over it. So maybe, one of the first things we ought to start doing is having our subcommittees look real close at what those performance indicators in the budget were, what their objectives and goals were, and are they reaching them, and if not, why not? And at the same time, I think, you know, we probably need a whole new strategic plan, and you know, just start from scratch with it. And then, as Buck says, it's going to take a few years to put this thing into play, and then it's going to be more years of tinkering with it till you get it just the way you want it, because you want valid indicators. You know, and you could put something in there and say, well, this agency's going to do X, Y, and Z each year, and we're going to accomplish this 100%. And then they find out, you know, well, X, Y, and Z really doesn't tell us what that agency does. It tells us part of what they do. So, you know, you got to pick it apart. It's intense, and then it creates, from my understanding, it creates a matrix that's basically going to give you direction and where you should be putting money and maybe where you shouldn't be putting money. But at the same time, even if you have performance-based budgeting, it can't take our constitutional authority away to move money around.
Right.
You know, that if we just feel like something needs to be done, we'll still have the ability to do that, even though this matrix or formula doesn't speak to it.
It sounds like one of those concepts that could be the theory on the surface can seem attractive to a lot of people, but it has a bunch of details underneath that have to be worked.
And the devil's in the detail. Yeah. You know, it's the little things make the big difference in life. You know, it's going to be the same in the budget.
We have a question from a viewer now. This one comes to us from Twitter, in fact, from Chuck in Greenville. And Chuck asks via Twitter, where does the Delta fit into the new budget? And looking over your bios here, gentlemen, I see we have one representative of the Delta, Senator Clark from Hollandale. Would you like to tackle that one,
well,
Mr. Chairman?
Well, he's the chairman, so it fits in pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we, you know, where the Delta fits in, just like the rest of the state. I mean, we have places like Delta State, which, you know, part of our IHL, and which is a big part of the budget. Our highway programs, you know, that's a big part, and all our public schools, you know, just like the rest of the state, those are parts for the Delta. You know, things that aren't as much a appropriations process as economic development and job creation. You know, that's really more a finance job when you're looking at things like that. And we're looking at things right now for the Delta. A couple of things. I last week talked to some people on some projects, and we're going to do all we can to lift the Delta.
And let me say this: the Delta offers some very unique challenges to the legislature and to the governor. And not only did they miss the Industrial Revolution of the 40s and 50s, but they missed the technology revolution that also occurred almost, with a few exceptions. And there are a lot of people that don't have skills, that have not had the opportunity to achieve skills to take part in some of the growing technological economy that we see across IT type jobs across the world, and certainly here in Mississippi. Some of the high-tech industries that have chosen to locate in other places. So the Delta, Southwest Mississippi, some of the other areas over in East Mississippi along the Alabama border, Kemper, Noxubee counties, they have some unique challenges that we have to address, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. The same thing that works for Newton County and Lauderdale, where I live, Scott, doesn't work for the Delta. So we're going to have to try to tailor some programs that will encourage job creation, encourage education, encourage businesses to locate there and take a chance on the Delta if they will. You can see some of the success stories in the Delta. If they'll take a chance, they'll succeed. They're good folks who are willing to work, and they know what work's all about with the agrarian economy that they've been a part of over the years.
I want to make a comment about the technology in the agrarian economy you just mentioned. That technology is one reason we've lost jobs. 30 years ago, you might need 20 men to work on a 2,000 acre farm. Right. Now those farms are 4,000 acres and you don't need but 8 men.
And you can have a tractor that runs on GPS.
That's exactly right.
And the skill sets aren't there to obtain employment.
Technology is what's driving agriculture these days. And agriculture's done well the last few years. Of course, corn prices are at historic highs, and soybean prices, and cotton's doing well. We'd like for cotton to come back. We'd like for catfish to come back. It's really been devastated. But, you know, these are the challenges we have, and it's just changes in the economy.
Now, you know, the great thing about the Delta is it is an agricultural engine of, you know, Mississippi, just like the Black Belt Prairie area, and that's the positives of it, you know, and it's a lot there that can be built on, and
Right.
and you know, it's a unique area, and it's, you know, like Buck said, you know, when it comes to row crops, it's probably one of the best places in the world to be in that business. You know, we need to find ways where economic development fits into that agrarian economy they have, and I think there are ways for that to happen, as well as, you know, expanding it to other
well, just further processing of the agricultural products we produce right now. You know, we had the vertical integration of the catfish industry, which is still there, but it's just been hammered in so many ways. Foreign catfish is a competitive, you know, side of it, but you know, if we can figure out ways, we've always talked about, you know, why didn't we ever have a cotton bill? Well, they're all in the Carolinas, and why aren't we further processing soybeans? And we crush some beans, but we do. There's a rice plant in Greenville, and you know, we always need to look at those things.
Let's move on to education now. Earlier today, the Mississippi Senate voted 43-4 to merge the 3 school districts in Sunflower County into one. That bill now moves to the House. It's expected that the bill could save local taxpayers $1.2 million a year. Representative Frierson, you're on the Education Committee in the House. Do you think that we'll see more of this type of thing in the future?
I hope we do, and I hope we see it with local community involvement in it, where they're coming and realizing that, hey, we can improve a situation by doing this. And it's, you know, all the politics, especially in schools, are local, and they're very protective of their turf and all, and it's hard to get them to see the advantages and benefits of coming together like that to save money, and at the same time, you're really not saving money. You're plowing it back into the system, into the school system, and you're becoming more efficient. And you're able to offer the things that a real small school that doesn't have much of an ad valorem base and has a tough situation, it kind of broadens horizons for them, and we just hope people will be more receptive to that than they have in the past. And that's one of the most controversial things that's ever been before the legislature, whether, you know, it went through it in the early part of the 1900s when they consolidated, cut the number of schools in half, then again in the 50s they did it, and you know, it looks like we're at that crossroads again. And you know, I would really like to see if it was some way that we could that we could cause that to come from the people who are involved in those districts and who have children in those schools, coming together and driving it to us and saying, yes, we want to do this because it creates more opportunities.
Do you not hear that from your constituents already?
You don't hear it very much.
Really?
No, you don't. I mean, people like their school the way it is, and maybe they just don't realize that it could be better.
Because you hear it on talk radio, for one. We're talking about the administrative costs and having so many districts and so many superintendents, you know, one for each district, who might in some cases be very highly paid. And that's where the perception is that there could be a great money savings, is that if we had fewer administrative costs related to these many districts, that could be a good positive savings for the state.
Well, it could be. I'm familiar with one county where the savings would be, where you take 3 schools, put them together, you'd have about a $2 million savings just in salaries alone. You know, you hadn't even got into the back office and all that stuff. But for the legislature to go out there and force them to do it, if they're not in a situation where the schools are failing and you know, and things just aren't working there, and to go in and say, we're going to make y'all do this, I mean, you're really asking for some trouble.
Representative Huddleston, do you hear much of this from your constituents, that people concerned about there being too many districts, too many schools?
Well, I do. I live in a unique place. I live in Pontotoc, the city of Pontotoc, which is in Pontotoc County. And we have 2 school districts, one in the city and one in the county. Both of them are just really good performing schools. And I think the people who are close to me up there, that I shop with, visit with, go to church with, realize we have real good schools, and they take the approach, you know, if it's not broke, let's don't tear it up and try to fix it. So we have really good schools. I think one of the things that that we need to bring out here is, when you have a failing school district, and you get that school from the status of failing and get them going up the ladder toward the top schools, it costs less money to educate a top student than it does a failing student. And you look at some of these school districts, and I'm not familiar with the cost per student in the Delta, but I'm very familiar with northeastern Mississippi. Our school district is a really good performing school, and it costs about $8,000 per year, both in the city and the county, to educate the children at this level. Failing district schools, $13,000 per student, so that's $5,000 more per student. And you would think that it would be the other way around, that the more money you put into the school, the better the school's going to be. But when you improve the teachers, when you improve the discipline, when you improve the leadership, when you get the children focused, it takes less money to educate them than it does when they're failing.
Devil's in the details, as you said.
Yeah.
That, a theory that might be attractive to a lot of people that has a lot of things to figure out underneath. We have a phone call now. This is Charles in Hattiesburg. Charles, go ahead with your call, with your question, please.
Hello, sir, Mr. Burton. My question is to you, sir. As you know, the Legislative Budget Committee has made a report. And as you know, the estimates for the collection of all taxes will be in March, I think. Is that correct, sir?
The collections on what now? I'm sorry.
In March, is that correct, sir?
Yes.
All right. My question is this. Once that estimate is made, then the legislature will make a recommendation on the budget. What factor would that be made? Would that be made up and down on what the budget would be? Thank you.
Well, the revenue estimates come in. We think that the amount that we will have to work with by the end of the legislative session will be X number of dollars. Let's just say it's, for lack of a better number, $4.5 billion.
And this is estimated tax revenue.
It's estimated tax revenue.
And recurring revenue we're talking about.
Yeah, we're not talking about any one-time monies or special funds. We're talking about general funds. And let me say this. The budget is just shy of $5 billion in general funds, but it's an $18 billion budget plus, $18 billion plus. So we have a lot of special funds, a lot of federal funds, a lot of other sources, but general funds, it's just shy of $5 billion. So let's say that we think we're going to have $4.5 billion to work with. We make that determination in November, and we're supposed to guess out here sometime in March or April what that number is going to be. Now we've got the last 3 months of this half of the fiscal year, and the first 3 or 4 months of this part of the fiscal year, and I mean, you just don't know. It could come in high, low, whatever. So we use a number based on what we think. When we get back in March or April, the Legislative Budget Committee will meet and change that number up or down depending on what the income has looked like. And that will be the final number that we work with, and that will determine how much of the agency's request and the sources of funds that we'll be sharing with other agencies out there as we see fit. So we've got a long way to go in this process. That recommendation comes in November, or actually is voted on in November but made public in December, and we're 4 or 5 months away from when we'll actually be determining the number in March or April. So it's a guessing game. Best we can do is guess, and we've come pretty close. We've only upped it or downed it, 1 or half or 1% over the years, last several years. So we guess pretty close, but we'll have good months, we'll have bad months on our revenue. If the economy goes south, we'll have more bad months than good months, and we just have to make that determination. But right now it looks like we're going to have somewhere around $4.6 billion to work with.
Moving target.
Moving target.
All right. Well, the governor's also pushing in his budget recommendation to put more of the funding shortfalls on local school districts, forcing them to use their reserve funds. So, gentlemen, do you think this is the way to go about easing the burden on the state? Representative Frierson, let me start with you.
I think we need to use less of the reserve funds, and we need to carry about $100 million of the reserve funds that we have right now, if in any way possible, over into the next fiscal year, so that we got something to work with where we can step this down to where we, like I said in the opening, we don't want to get to the point that we drive up to a cliff and have to make just enormous cuts to balance out. If we step it down over the years, we'll be all right.
What about at the local level, the budget reserves?
Because
that's what the governor
reserves at local level. You know, I understand that, but if you go out there and you capture $72 million from the school districts and you pull it in and you factor it into your budget, you just added $72 million of one-time money to your budget that you got to deal with again next year when you come back in there. I would rather just give them a budget even if it had a lower amount of money, and although I'm not proposing that, I'm just saying if we do that and just tell them, look, y'all gonna have to make it work, you know, and let them make the decision whether they go into their reserve funds or whether they make cuts. And I think those decisions might be made better on the local level than on the state level.
I think there were probably some people surprised to know that there were reserve funds even at the local level. Is there a lot of reserve money out there at these local school districts?
There is, and you hear differing amounts. But one thing to keep in mind too, they're not equitably distributed around the state. There are some that have done great jobs of protecting that money and have plans for that money, you know, capital expenditures and other things, and to plan for shortfalls that the legislature may throw their way. And then there are others that maybe didn't. I mean, I believe one of the school districts in Sunflower County that are, you know, in conservatorship right now, they have financial problems. And I think there's a couple of school districts in South Mississippi I know that has had severe financial problems. So obviously they don't have the funds aside. So like Chairman Frierson said, you know, it's at the local level they can run their budgets, and we might have to do that.
And another thing, you have a lot of districts out there that are just very sound financially because they've made the right decisions.
Yeah.
And you got some that are not. And when we capture their money, are we not punishing them for being financially prudent and rewarding those that are not, because we're going to, you know, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul, and plus we would probably have to make a special appropriation to those who do not have a cash reserve. But we don't make that special appropriation to those who have been prudent with their money and not spend every penny that they had every year. And you know, it's a tough call, and that's why I'd rather just say, instead of just saying we're going to capture your money, just say, look, this is the best we can do, and you need to do the best you can with what you have.
That having reserve funds is not a bad thing. I mean, we encourage strong fiscal management and prudent decisions, and the fact that they have a reserve fund tells me that they've made some prudent decisions over the years, and those that don't have reserve funds maybe didn't make those prudent decisions. We've tried to do that at our level. I mean, we've tried to keep the reserve fund going, make sure we didn't spend down all of our reserves, and in the interest of doing that, I would hate for us to go out and capture all the reserves of a school district, or a great majority of the reserves of a school district that has done the right thing and made the right decisions, like Representative Frierson said, and then turn around and reward those districts that haven't. So we need to be very careful. I'm not saying they shouldn't use some of their reserve funds. They certainly should, just like we're going to have to do, but we need to be careful how we tell them to do that.
And you know, those reserve funds, we don't know for sure exactly what is there, because you say the five of us are school board in XYZ school district, and you know, and we decide we're going to create the special construction fund, and we put money in it. We're going to create the Improve Every Child's Education Fund, and we put money in it, but we never take money out of it. So we don't know how many of those funds really are out there without almost a specific audit of every district.
And
another thing, there's a lot of that money. There may be $1 billion of it out there in state government between your junior college, universities, and K-12. Maybe more, maybe a little less, but I've heard estimates around $1 billion. And that's why I say, when you just do the best we can at our level and ask them to do the best they can at their level, everybody knows we have a very difficult situation. But if you go out there and you capture it and you pull it into our budget, we come back in here next year on your show and say, well, you remember that $72 million we took from the districts? Now we got to find a way to replace it.
Yep. We have a caller, a question on the line now from Troy in Vicksburg. Troy, go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, good evening, gentlemen. God bless you and your families. I'm wondering why that they said no child left behind dealing with the educational system. I do believe they have the resources to take care of all the teachers and pay them very well where they can take care of their families too. But the problem that I have is you have all these kids that are left behind, and you take the money and resources and put all the emphasis on the children that are making straight A's and B's honor roll, but the kids that are skipping school, out breaking in houses, smoking marijuana, on drugs, they are left behind. They're going to jail instead of giving them a fair chance. And I came through the school system at about, I'd say 20-some years ago there now, and it was somewhat the same way, but I was raised the right way, made to go to church and Sunday school. And back in my time when I came through the school system, Jesus and prayer was still in the school system, and that's the number one thing. They need to put Jesus and prayer back in the school system. And I'm wondering why they won't take the emphasis and put on these kids that are walking the streets every day. Can someone answer that for me?
Troy brought up a lot of issues there. What role? What can you do there?
Troy, one thing is, and you made a point that you were brought up apparently, obviously, in a family that valued education. You were in a community setting that valued education. And when you have children coming from a situation where the education's not valued at home, it's not valued in the community, I pose the question to you and everybody else listening, how do we legislate people caring about the quality of education that their children are getting and their community is getting when they're being shown the right way to do things, the school districts are, but they're not doing them that way, and they continually be failing school districts, and they have a lot of the children like what you're talking about in them. So it's not an easy, quick fix is the point I want to make. And yes, we do recognize there's a problem. We do have a lot of programs out there that are aimed at trying to help at-risk children. And that's just what you described. At-risk children generally come from low-income situations, although some of them do come from middle and high-income backgrounds. But we have a lot of programs out there.
We recognize that in our funding.
Yeah, we recognize it in our funding, but we can't crack the head open and pour the education in. You got to have a commitment from the person who desires to receive it. And we desired to receive it because when we got home with low grades, our parents dealt with it. Mm-hmm. They found a way to motivate us, and we just, we do the best we can.
Well, let me say this too. We have the adolescent offender program through the Department of Human Services that we've expanded, trying to catch some of these young people, the ones that Troy described there. So outside of the Department of Education, we also have other means of trying to deal with that would try to make sure that we do a couple of things. Number one, we have the dropout recovery program with community colleges. We have the dropout prevention program in the Department of Ed. We have the adolescent offender program to catch those who we can't catch any other way. So we're dealing with it in more ways than you can possibly imagine. A lot of money is spent on these at-risk kids who, for whatever reason, can't or won't learn.
All right, new topic. Let's talk about Medicaid. It's estimated that by fiscal year 2013, the one we're talking about, that just over 650,000 Mississippians will be on Medicaid. How does that figure into the budgeting process?
Well, I think that ties into what's going to happen in Washington to a great degree. The Federal Health Care Act that passed last year that's still under great debate, and there's elections coming up this coming year, and there could be changes in Washington that would affect our budget, just to be frank. But now, we have to deal with what the law is right now. We can't really anticipate that they're going to change anything. And if the changes do take place that we see in the law, when would it, is it in 14 or 15?
2014.
14.
Fiscal.
And the Medicaid eligibility rules are expanded. How many people will be added to the Medicaid rolls?
I heard 300,000. How many did you hear?
It's a lot of numbers out there, in other words.
The end result will be a third of the population of the state of Mississippi will be on Medicaid.
And the end result, that will consume our budget.
It will. I mean, we won't be talking about new money we're going to put in education or in IHL or the health department. It's going to be like Ross Perot said about NAFTA being the great sucking sound. Well, we're going to have a great sucking sound, but it's not going to be pulling jobs out of Mississippi. It's going to be pulling general fund dollars all into the Medicaid budget. And it's going to be
But Mississippi's
a
not the
challenging situation.
But Mississippi's not alone.
That's all over the country.
Let me say this.
It's an unfunded mandate from the federal government.
Sure it is, and I've dealt with Medicaid for a lot of years. I've had that budget a long time. I've dealt with the general bills that come through. Number one, Medicaid sunsets this year, so we have to reauthorize the division. That's going to be a challenge in and of itself, so we'll get that done. But the budget part of it, let me tell you, if we maintain everything just as it is, I'm talking about the services that we provide, the payment schedules that we have, and so forth and so on, just as it is right now, and if the federal match doesn't change. The federal match right now is about $76.24 for every dollar that we spend on Medicaid. 76 cents of that dollar comes from the feds. We have the highest match rate of any state. Mm-hmm. But if they decide to go down on that FMAP to 60-40, 50-50, like other states, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. It's going to be bad enough, all things being equal. You're talking about at least $350 million more general fund dollars, given where we are with the PIPAPA, whatever it is, the PIPACA, Patient and Affordable Care Act, or whatever it is. But the PIPACA is going to really cost us if everything stays the same. But if they change that match rate or anything else, require us to provide services that we don't now and those kinds of things, then you're really going to see increases. So Medicaid is going to be, no question, the issue of the next 2 or 3 years that we have to
Our
deal with.
Medicaid chairman in the House, Bobby Howe from Kilmichael, he's already looking at a whole litany of things that are being brought to him on ways that we can control costs in Medicaid. And I'm sure the Senate are looking at those very similar things. And, you know, that's going to be a big focus of our attention because it's like Buck said, we got to deal with what the law is right now. You know, and maybe we'll get a change in D.C., a change of heart, and maybe they'll back off this a little bit.
And as Senator Burton is saying, it could come sooner than later.
Well, a lot of ifs there, so we'll keep an eye on that and see what happens. Back to the governor's budget proposal, his recommendation. He's proposing giving state agencies lump sum authority. And he goes on to say that directors know the needs of the agencies and should have the freedom to spend money where it will make significant impact. So do you agree with this idea of lump sum authority? Who wants to take that? You all have a role in that and knowledge of it.
Yeah, I like it. I like the idea of it. Well, if we're going to hire these people and pay them these big salaries to manage and run those agencies, we ought to give them the freedom to do it. The other thing, I just don't think as a appropriations chairman, am knowledgeable enough about that agency to be telling them how to spend all their money, although there are situations where you have to because of things that have happened in the past. So yeah, I want to free them up as much as we can, and let them do their job, because it's going to get tough in the next 2 years, and they're going to need the freedom to move that money around in their budgets to keep themselves above water financially.
I agree. And the only thing I would add is I grant that authority freely, but I want some accountability on the other side.
Right.
We're going to give you the ability to run your agency and provide services to the state. You tell us what you can do with this amount of money, and that's what we expect. And we're going to come back and we're going to look at you next year and say, okay, how'd you do? And if you didn't do good, there's going to be a price to pay there.
How is that different from how it's done now?
You see, this sounds like performance-based budgeting. What's
very similar.
Talking about.
It's very similar.
Very similar.
Since '94.
Well, essentially the way the bill's written, the appropriations bill, instead of the appropriations bill saying we're going to, this agency is going to have $10 million and this much is in salaries, this much is contractual and commodities, it's just one lump sum.
Hence the name. So you give the head of the agency the authority to figure out how to allocate that.
Right. And when you do that, you also have to take a little known subject outside the legislature out of the process, and that's budget notes, where a subcommittee chairman attempts to, or the chairman attempts to instruct an agency as to how they will spend some of their money. So if you're going to have true lump sum, you got to give up a little bit of that legislative authority and let those lump sums, let those budget notes go too.
There's bound to be plenty of folks who don't want to do that.
Well, I'm sure they are, but I mean, I don't think at this table that there's a lot that have a problem with it.
The only other thing that I would mention is that the salaries category is separate. We do watch that salaries category to make sure that they don't spend money over and above the amount that should go to pay for the employees that we authorize. So the salaries category would be separate.
And if we can, like Terry's saying, if we're going to have some transparency and some accountability in here, and we come back in here next year and somebody didn't do right with that money, they may not get a lump sum again. Right. We still have that authority to come back and say, hey, you guys, y'all couldn't handle it.
I'm all about rewarding success.
That's it.
All right, well, the governor is also proposing that all agencies be exempted from state personnel board requirements for the next 4 years. What impact do y'all think that could have on the budget, and could it save us some money?
Absolutely save some money. Department of Corrections is our best example. How many years ago did they do that? Was it
it was Governor Barber's first term.
First term, yeah.
04 budget.
04. And it saves a substantial amount of money.
Because what did this enable them to do?
Well, they can restructure. It's dealing with personnel. There's certain rules under our personnel board that they have to adhere to, and it just gives the head of that agency more freedom to manage his personnel.
It doesn't sound a whole lot different from the lump sum idea. Just one deals with people and one deals with money.
They should go in tandem, actually.
They should go together, that's right.
And the Department of Corrections is a shining example. Over the last, since they were able to do that in 04, here we are in dealing with the 2013 budget. They've saved somewhere, 30 million, something like that, over the 10-year period. A lot of money. And when Lester Spell was elected Agriculture Commissioner, we took away the personnel board restrictions, and he made some changes, saved a lot of money, trimmed that agency down, got more efficient, and we also did the same thing with the Department of Transportation several years ago. So this is not the first time we've gone through this.
You put an enormous amount of faith and trust into your agency heads when you do something like that.
They have to come back and look us in the eye next year when they request that budget, and that's the time to say, did it accomplish what we thought it would accomplish? And if it didn't, that's the time to take that ability to do that away.
One option that would give to the budget writing team would be that we could tell them, if you reduce that workforce and you have a savings, you're going to write a check to the state treasury and push that money forward, if you chose to, into the next budget instead of it next calendar year or budget year, and instead of having an efficiency, you have a literal savings.
Exactly.
And you push general fund dollars forward that replaces that bad old one-time money that we're trying to get rid of. So it gives us a lot of options. The agency can become more efficient, or they can push the money forward.
I have another caller on the line. This is from Lonnie in Greenville. Lonnie, go ahead with your question, please.
All right, thanks for taking my call. I'm getting ready to retire on PERS state retirement. Do you have any comments on the study that was done?
Public employees retirement.
This is a study, and we've had a lot of studies done over the years that have gathered dust in the basement of the Capitol. I don't know what will happen with this one, but let me say this. I value the retirees of Mississippi. I value the hard work that they put in on behalf of the state. I know that many state employees, if not all state employees, are hired with the idea that we can't pay you what you're worth. The salary's not going to be much when it comes down to what you might make out in the private sector, but we really need you. And at the end of the day, when you retire, you're going to be okay. We're going to do this for you because we can't do it now. And so I think that we've made promises to our state employees and our current retirees that we need to keep. And we need to look at making some changes only for new hires, only for those that might come into the system later on who are not currently vested. and decide what options they may have and what options we might have in dealing with them. But as far as current employees who are vested in the system, current retirees, I would say, from my point of view, and I only speak for me, I'm one vote out of 52, you have no worries where I'm concerned.
I feel the same way, and but I mean we've got to be concerned about the retirement system. You know, the numbers are out there. Everybody knows that we have about 60% of the assets needed to actually pay the retirement of the people in the system right now. And you can look at Wall Street. There have been many companies taken down and have gone broke because they couldn't fund their retirement system. I think I read in the paper the other day, Kodak, that's going broke right now, filed for bankruptcy. They can't meet their pension obligations. So that's why it's a serious problem.
It is a problem.
But as Senator Burton said, I think anyone in the retirement system now, retired now or in the system, can feel secure that it's going to be there. But going forward, we've just got to make some tough decisions, and we just
maybe give some options to new hires and so forth,
right.
and try to shore it up. We simply can't, and a lot of it is, you know, because of the investment problems and the volatility of the stock market and all those things that happen.
Right.
That's because we do have so much invested. But I would think that any proposed changes that I would be in favor of would simply be for new hires and give some options that might make the system more secure over the next several years. We've got a great system, and we don't need to tinker too much with it. So.
We'll go back to the phone lines now, and a call from Pontotoc. David in Pontotoc. David, go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, I just want to point out in Pontotoc, Mississippi, that we have got a great man there that has helped the county. We have jobs going in. He's pushed. He's a Vietnam War hero. He flew a helicopter. He's a great veterinarian. I don't even know what he's doing working for the state like this. He's a fine horse doctor. Got a wife that's a great doctor. He is really, really a good person for this job, and with Mississippi, with people like him in there, with morals, and morals comes before anything with him. We should move ahead with our schools, move ahead with our factories, and move ahead with things that will benefit all the different counties.
We appreciate your comments. Do you have a question, David?
No, y'all just keep up the good work, all of you. We've got a fine state and a fine group of people, not people that's just working for money, but people who work like he always has for nothing. He's done this all of his life.
Thank you for your call, David in Pontotoc. You didn't plant that call, did you?
I didn't. I didn't think anybody from Pontotoc knew I was going to be on this program. But, you know,
well, at least one.
David is a great Mississippian and a great American, as you can tell.
He thinks the same about
and
you.
Those people are invaluable to help us to do what we're trying to do. Great guy.
We do have a question via email now. When do you estimate the legislature will be able to fully fund MAEP, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program? This has come up at least for the past, 2 or 3 years, whenever this first came out.
Every year.
Will there be, I believe the governor's proposal was level funding for MAEP. Where do you all stand on MAEP funding, and will we ever be able to fully fund it, and do we need to?
Well, how many years has MAEP been?
It's actually been fully funded. I mean, literally fully funded once.
And how long has it been?
I can't remember. Yeah. We came close another time.
2006 or 7.
Yeah.
Right after Katrina.
We came close another time. You could actually call it fully funding, but literally fully funded once.
Right now, I think it would take about $250 million from what we funded last year to get us up to an additional $250 million. And it's a formula, a complicated formula, that where they go study successful school districts and what it would take to fund an adequate school and a school district, and then those numbers are crunched down, and then it's on a per student basis is the way the numbers come about, and then there's a growth factor in there, consumer price index and inflationary figure that's added, and it's the largest part of our budget, and it's just we need to take a serious look at the formula itself.
So
to have had this formula since the late 90s and funded it fully one time, we might need to take a serious look at the whole formula.
But it's safe to say that if the money were there, all 4 of you would be in favor of fully funding it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we had the money. But we've only had the money a couple of times to do it with. And if we add 300,000 people to our Medicaid roll, and we keep the same formula, I bet you we could get some pretty good Vegas odds on it not ever being full funded again. And that is a problem in itself, because the reason we did that, come up with that formula, was to avoid the lawsuits that states like Kentucky and Texas and Arkansas and some others got into, to where there was an equity lawsuit where children in a very Avalon poor district, where they're only spending maybe a half of what they were spending in an affluent suburb per child, and the state constitutions, especially in the South, say that we're going to provide a free public education. And it's been construed that if you've got that much difference in the funding of per child in the same state, well, this child over here that's getting the least amount spent on them is not getting that free public education that those in those more well-to-do districts are. And that's why we did it. So we need to look at this thing and see if we can, what we need to do to make it work and work inside our budget. Our budget over the past 12 years has grown, even with great fluctuations, has averaged 3% growth. Well, most people involved in government will tell you that you can fund government and you can do all the things you need to do if you're averaging 3% growth a year over a long period of time. Even though we had great losses in 7 and 8 in revenue. And, you know, maybe we need a formula that lives inside 3% growth, you know, and get it full funded and then see if we can maintain that. Because, I mean, we're going to be further and further behind. This formula grows. Right. It doesn't grow by huge amounts, but it grows by 8 or 10 million a year, whether anything. For some reason, you know, I'm not an expert on it, but it grows. You know?
Well, our time is growing short, unfortunately. Representatives Fyerson and Huddleston and Senators Clark and Burton, we thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
It's all the time we have for this week's Quorum. Remember, you can watch this episode again starting tomorrow at mpbonline.org. We invite you to join us again next Wednesday for another episode of Quorum. I'm Wilson Stripling. Good night.